Okay guys, today we're going to talk about how to HIPP a document. This is something we're going to be working with all throughout the year. I know you've done this, hopefully some of you have done this in other classes, but I want to talk about it in the context of a history class. So this is a chart and I'm going to give it to you. It also has, it explains it and then gives you some words you might want to use as you're going through the process of HIPPing a document. So let's talk real quick about what HIPP stands for. So the H in HIPP, of course, is the historical context. I, intended audience. P, purpose or point of view. And then we do add O, that's other context, and we will talk about that differently, or at a different time. So the key thing I want you to focus on when you're working on assignments for the rest of this course is about the document you are HIPPing. It's not the topic of the essay. It's not telling the purpose of the Civil War. And you're not telling me the historical context of a broad period of time or a topic of an essay. You are talking specifically about the document. So let's look at how that works. First we have historical context. When you're doing this type of extended analysis, it means you should be answering one or a combination of these questions. What led to the creation of this specific document? For example, if the essay is about the Declaration of Independence, you have an excerpt. You don't just talk about Enlightenment and the American Revolution. You talk specifically as a response to Lexington and Concord. And that provides the historical context for you. And it provides the historical context for the decision to write the Declaration of Independence. Or you could talk about the context of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. That the people was a good idea, and so the Declaration of Independence is happening. In this debate over declaring independence, what you could answer is what that document does in terms of this historical context. So certain words that you can use, you can give the years, you can tell the events that surround that historical context, what was the culture, what was the economic setting. Intended audience must look at who the author is speaking to and why. Okay, the why question here is really important. And you can't just say, for instance, you've all had John Locke in your civics in his second treatise on civil government. It's written to the people. You can't say that. We all know the people is never the answer. That is the way, it is way too broad. It is never ever going to be acceptable for intended audience. It's kind of a BS answer actually. And the answer, if you say the people, you are not being specific. You must specify who are the people that you are talking about. Okay, who would it appeal to? So it can never ever be just the people. It's a cop-out answer. All right, you can consider intended audience, politicians, editors, competitors, government officials. If it's the public, that's different from the people, okay? They might be writing just for themselves, to the family, to a friend. So analyze, don't use a general term. And then what is the purpose of the document? So here you might talk about what kind of document is it. If it's a diary or a journal, the purpose might be to just record something for future use or for posterity. To have a historical record. If it's a letter, it might be to convince someone to take action or to influence somebody to vote a certain way. If it's a speech in public, it could be designed to influence the passage of a law or to get somebody to vote for you. So look at that purpose and don't confuse purpose with analysis of what the document says. That's a problem I see quite often that students run into. So you can't say the purpose of the document is what the document is actually saying. So, for example, again, John Locke. In his document on civil government, it says that the purpose of government is to protect the natural rights of citizens, life, liberty, and property. So you can't say the purpose of the document is to protect people's natural rights. That's what the document says, but the purpose has to be something different outside the document. So basically it's trying to convince Parliament, right? The purpose is to get Parliament to give people these rights. And then finally, point of view. This is always the point of view of the author or an artist, if it's an image or a painting or a woodcut, and that means you're talking about what is it in the background of the writer that impacts the source. You can never just say, like, the woman, that the author is a woman, so she believes this way, or the author is a nobility, so he believes this way, or the author is a priest, so he believes this way. They don't always agree. So you got to, again, when you're doing these things, think specific, specific, specific. Okay? You guys just keep in mind as you're working on HIPP that the purpose here is to show that you know something about the document. Okay? Specifically, that helps you understand the source better. So you're trying to make sure you do that in a good way to make sure you've covered HIPP. Good thing to use when you're describing things is appositives. Appositives is a phrase when you are stating something that renames a noun. And you can always put your HIPP in the appositive place because you're basically explaining something about the author or something about the document. So for instance, again, going back to Declaration of Independence, if you were to write Thomas Jefferson, comma, the writer of the Declaration of Independence and future President of the United States, comma, and then going on, that's your appositive. You're explaining that noun. You're adding something a little bit extra. Okay? Other context, we'll get into that as we talk about the actual writing of these essays. But just keep in mind, when we're talking about HIPP, it's always about the document, okay? It's not about the topic of the essay, but you are specifically looking at that document and giving me specific information.